Women's rights have come a long way, but with regards to sexual assault and harassment, the fight is not yet over. We still have to deal with unsolicited sexual advances and sexual innuendos in the workplace and in public spaces. Additionally, if something inappropriate happens, most women won't raise their hands to say something because the allegation won't be believed, or worse, the woman will be faulted for what actually happened. And the men in a position of power who take full advantage knowing that a woman won't necessarily typically come forward. So simply look at what happened to Anita Hill back in 1991, or you can even look at what happened to Dr. Christine Ford most recently, now in 2018. Both women came forward to share their experiences of assault and harassment against two Supreme Court nominees, and neither one was believed. And ultimately, these two men were promoted to the highest position in our country. So workplace policies need to change by letting victims know there will be no reprisals for coming forward, and jobs ultimately should be protected. But I think another really great course of action would be developing in-person training with real-life experiences in the classroom. The training should be taught by someone who is an expert on the subject, and while the material might make some people uncomfortable, being uncomfortable is good because that will help right the wrongs of the past, and it will also help change the current status quo. There are many ways companies can reduce workplace assault or harassment by making personal safety of all employees a priority. There really is, when you go through sexual harassment or assault, there is an emotional impact and an inability to process what actually happened. And since that impact is so profound, that's why so many people choose to not tell their family or friends or their HR representative at their place of employment. And that was written in an article in Business Newsweek by the authors Greenfield, Paskin, Lawrence, and Edelson in 2018. Additionally, they said that many people believe that sexual assault and harassment is costly to any company, and when employees are harassed, they usually end up missing work, or worse, they end up quitting just so they can start over. What type of impact does this have? Well, in that same article in the Business Newsweek, written by Greenfield, Paskin, Lauren, and Edelson in 2018, they've said that women who have been sexually harassed at work are 6.5 times more likely to leave their jobs than women who haven't. So people need to demand more from the companies that they work for. So workplace policies should change by letting victims know there will be no reprisals for coming forward. And obviously by now, most people know that it is morally wrong to sexually harass or assault somebody. But knowing that it's wrong is not enough. What we need is a solution. So every company has an HR department, but what they don't have is a diversity affairs department. But a diversity affairs department falls under the HR division, and they are all about inclusion and acceptance. So diversity affairs can really foster in-person training with real-life experiences in the classroom, and this can help start the conversation in a business setting. And I think that is the key difference, because this will make it more authentic instead of just watching some laughable 10-minute video. So how does sexual harassment relate to ethics? So ethical theories can help us reflect on what is clearly right and wrong. Ruth Benedict, who is an anthropologist, was right in the sense that the society, or the men who rule the society, have been the approving voice, and cultural relativism would say that it is right if the society approves it. Ruth Benedict stated, the concept of the normal is properly a variant of the concept of the good. It is that which society has approved. So that's an interesting quote. And while some might believe that the lines between right and wrong are blurred, it is clear that it is morally wrong to sexually assault somebody. But as we know, it's not just about knowing. So, Nell Noddings is a philosopher with feminist views of ethics. And Noddings' views would work really well in the workplace with regards to sexual harassment training and policies. So, for example, if the HR division needs to show compassion when employees approach them about issues, they'll kind of dig deep for that. So, example would be if an employee wants to report a sexual harassment claim, the HR professional needs to display ethical caring in order to support that employee. So, which brings me to Immanuel Kant, who is another philosopher, and Noddings. They both feel strongly about doing the right thing, whether it's following the law of caring or whether it's following the law or just caring in general. We know that sexual harassment is wrong. However, that's not the case for every situation. For example, it is wrong to physically hurt someone, but if you see somebody getting assaulted and you jump in to hurt that attacker to stop what's happening, that would be okay. But universal law would limit you from doing that. So, which brings me to the Society for Human Resource Management. They say that sexual harassment in Hollywood and in the political arena have impacted the average workplace nationwide. So in their professional code of ethics, their core principle states that they add value to the organizations as an HR professional and that they need to contribute to the ethical success of the company that they're working for. And they acknowledge that they are responsible for the decisions or actions as individual and professionals. And while the HR professional or the HR division is a strategic partner within an organization, they are expected to enforce those policies. So SHRM is ensuring that the most current language is up to date and is being included in corporate policies, which is fantastic. Procedures are in place to state how to report an issue, and if an issue is reported, what are the ramifications if you're engaging in that kind of behavior. So one of the guidelines in their professional code of ethics says, fairness and justice. They write, develop, administer, and advocate policies and procedures that foster fair and consistent and equitable treatment for all. So that's a guideline that should be applied to every instance of sexual harassment. HR is the face of fairness, and they should do everything within their power to foster an environment that promotes the fairness to the entire employee population. Makes sense? So trainings in the workplace. According to the Society for Human Resource Management, they state only 10% of 1,512 adults working in the U.S. said their organizations added more anti-sexual harassment training or resources since senior leaders in multiple organizations were publicly accused of sexual harassment. And the Me Too and Time's Up movement started. And these findings are from a Harris poll conducted in February and March of 2018, and that was written by the author Gerchiak in 2018. And while I know that's a frightening statistic, what should be done, as stated by the author Gerchiak, is that every person should go home and ask if they've ever experienced in their work life an instant of sexual harassment. And that could really be a turning point for a lot of individuals. People often wonder if there's only one type of harassment, and there's actually two. There's the quid pro quo, and you can look to Anita Hill to see that example. And the other type is hostile work environment, which can happen on any level, and it's probably not as frequent, but that doesn't mean that the comments are any less offensive, but it's a little bit more difficult to detect, and I think that's why it makes sexual harassment so tricky in general. So we have to ultimately demand more from people in a position of power. It's about doing away with the boys will be boys mentality. Many people assume that Dr. Ford was lying, and the same thing can go for Anita Hill. But it's not just men in the Senate that feel that way, it's women too. And it is really great that companies have policies in place and that they have annual zero tolerance agreements to re-sign as their commitment to prevent sexual harassment or any kind of unwanted behavior. However, if you don't have other things in place, re-signing those little silly agreements will be meaningless to a lot of people. So it's typical that men in a position of power behave inappropriately and say inappropriate things. So in the article, The Collective Power of Me Too, written by Sarah Jaffe, she states that we cannot trust our officials to look out for those who need it the most. It is up to the voter to figure out who can. So when laws are in place, companies will take that very seriously. And the court system doesn't always work for survivors, she states, and ultimately that HR is a tool of the boss. So male dominance in the workplace isn't anything new, but in the wave of the Me Too movement, it feels as though it might change, even if it's happening slowly. So this is exactly why the HR division within every company should strive to do better and be better with regards to implementing policies and trainings. And it's kind of hard to believe that in 2018 we still have to debate a woman's worth in the workplace. We know she's valuable, but the moment a woman brings up a claim of sexual harassment, she becomes a workplace pariah. So imagine a better course of action that would be developing an in-person training, much like the hashtag more than mean tweets that were read by sports fans to women's sports reporter. Imagine how impactful something similar to the more than mean tweets would be in the workplace. Just imagine how much a behavior can change. And that would be impactful because it would make men aware that their words and behavior have a negative impact to those on the receiving end. This type of training is more meaningful than a 10-minute video. If utilitarianism has taught us anything, it's about the end result, which is more happiness and the minimal amount of pain. We can minimize the amount of pain women receive by doing a better job with training and having readily available educational tools, because without those, policies and procedures are absolutely meaningless. Thank you.